The Middle Ages were a bitterly violent period of virtually incessant warfare. Battles, sieges, military assaults, and armed raids were commonplace. Close combat at this time was energetic, intense, and invariably brutal. Yet by no means was it without tactical skill and technical artistry. The battlefield of the later Middle Ages and early Renaissance was a dangerous and horrifying place. Arrows and spears flying, pole arms ramming and jostling, horses charging and falling, blades stabbing and slashing, blows clubbing and smashing, men pulling and falling, all surrounded by dirt, blood, cries, curses, and scattered bodies. It was a chaotic and unpredictable scene that could prove instantly fatal to a fighting man. No training could truly prepare an individual for all this. Under such conditions, what training and fighting skills provided, as did good weapons and armor, was to extend a man's chances of survival. The nature of close combat in these eras is not difficult to comprehend. This was a time where, for earnest self-defense, the displaying of form was never a greater concern over the lethality of practical function. As with most battles, single duels, and sudden assaults, personal combat was a violent physical activity, savage, vicious, and usually unforgiving, yet not without its moments of chivalric fair play and merciful honor. But idealized chivalric feats of arms were overshadowed by the bloodthirsty reality of common martial violence. It was this way because of the simple truth that men fighting for their lives, or filled with the fury of battle, are not often easily slain or deterred. Such was the reality of the often tragic, always bloody, frequently misportrayed, and yet widely celebrated fact of medieval and Renaissance close combat. This was particularly so for knightly judicial duels, the formal single combats of both legal and religious consequence, which often served to resolve both civil and criminal cases. More so than regulated tournament displays of fighting prowess with blunt weapons, such duels, even if not to the death, were fiercely contested. The necessity for an armored combatant to avoid defeat and take out his rival demanded substantial training, conditioning, and discipline. His close-fitting, technically ingenious armor, designed to face a diversity of weaponry, was light, agile, and virtually invulnerable to the cutting blows of bladed weapons. It was from such a medieval tradition of judicial single combat that the Renaissance duel of honor was to later develop. By the early 1500s, new military realities led to both innovations in methods of warfare as well as revivals of ancient martial science. The Renaissance battlefield had become dominated by infantry formations wielding long pole arms and supported by cannon. Whether on horseback or foot, the armored man-at-arms, with his skills in the chivalric art, was no longer the central military figure he once was. The transformation of warfare by firearms and the breakdown of the old feudal order also limited the fighting man's traditional avenues for both redress of personal grievance and exhibition of martial skill. The result was an explosion in the popularity of dueling, first as an augment of common street fighting and vendetta brawling, and later for private affairs of reputation and honor. Into this environment, the systematic study of fencing grew to emphasize urban self-defense and private duel. Fighting arts took on a more civilian dimension. Social and technological changes accelerated experimentation in fighting arts, and civilian schools of fence and public fighting guilds proliferated. Traditional military skills did not vanish entirely. Yet modern emphasis on the history of chivalric tournaments and the later formal duel of honor have tended to obscure the larger context of urban combat and the general armed violence inherent in the age. The romanticized view of gentlemen defending their reputation and character is dwarfed by accounts of sudden assaults, vicious armed ambushes, gang wars, and general street fighting among all social classes. For self-defense on foot, a wide array of personal arms and armor were employed, and skill in their use was a necessity. But following their medieval legacy, with each generation, experienced fighting men discerned, discovered, and invented fighting techniques that became a system, a discipline, and a tradition. Experts of these combatives became professional self-defense instructors and heads of fencing schools, masters of the art and science of defense, the martial arts of Renaissance Europe.